There is a person in your life your brain has decided is the problem. A boss who undermines you, an ex who never deserved you, a stranger who looked at you wrong once, 3 years ago, and hasn't been forgiven since. You have evidence. You have specific memories. You can feel the pattern clearly. The research on how human memory constructs narrative suggests you built most of that case yourself. Not because you're irrational, because you have a brain that was never designed to find the truth. It was designed to find a story that keeps you alive. This is not a video about forgiveness. It is not about being the bigger person or releasing resentment for your own well-being. This is about a specific cognitive architecture, one that evolution installed in human brains long before language, long before courts, long before the concept of fairness existed, and what happens when that architecture runs in a world it wasn't built for. Start with what the brain actually needs to function. The human brain processes somewhere between 11 million and 40 million bits of sensory information every second. It consciously handles roughly 40 of them. Everything else gets filtered, compressed, discarded, or quietly filed into categories that already exist. The brain is not a camera. It is an editor. And like every editor, it makes choices about what the story is before the footage even arrives. Psychologists call this confirmatory processing. The brain identifies a pattern, a threat, a type of person, a dynamic it recognizes, and begins filtering incoming information to confirm that pattern rather than evaluate it freshly. This is not a flaw. In an environment where a wrong read of another person's intentions could mean death, speed mattered more than accuracy. The brain that made fast calls about who was safe and who wasn't survived better than the brain that stayed open-minded until it had all the evidence. The problem is that the same system now runs on your coworker. In 2009, social psychologist Jennifer Bosson conducted a series of studies on what she called interpersonal chemistry through shared negative attitudes. She gathered strangers and gave groups a common target, a fictitious person described as irritating and self-important. The groups bonded faster and rated their connection more highly than groups given shared positive experiences. But the more significant finding came later. When Bosson's team tracked the mental models participants had built of the fictional target, they found that the negative qualities had expanded well beyond what was originally described. People who had never met this person, who had been given identical information about them, had each constructed a slightly different and consistently worse version. The brain hadn't stored the information it was given. It had used that information as a foundation and built upward. This is the mechanism, and it doesn't stop at strangers. Researchers studying long-term conflict between people who know each other well, marriages, workplace relationships, estrangements between family members, consistently find the same pattern. Both parties hold mental models of the other person that are wrong in the same direction. Not randomly wrong, systematically wrong. The difficult colleague is remembered as having been difficult in situations where neutral observers recorded nothing unusual. The ex-partner's good qualities are not absent from memory. They have been reclassified, reattributed. The same generosity that was once evidence of their character is now evidence of manipulation. The brain didn't change the facts. It changed what the facts meant. Leon Festinger documented the underlying mechanism in his work on cognitive dissonance in the 1950s. When two pieces of information conflict, this person hurt me and this person sometimes acted kindly, the brain experiences measurable psychological discomfort, not metaphorical discomfort, actual neurological friction. And the brain resolves that friction the fastest way available to it. It rewrites one of the inputs until the conflict disappears. Almost always, it rewrites the one that is harder to defend. Kindness gets reclassified. The villain gets cleaner. Think about what that means for the case you have built. Every specific memory you hold of the person who wronged you has been accessed, on average, dozens of times since it formed. And memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Every time you retrieve a memory, you rebuild it from available pieces. And every time you rebuild it, the version you store is slightly shaped by what you needed it to be when you accessed it. The researchers who first documented this, Elizabeth Loftus in her work on memory malleability through the 1970s and 1980s, found that memories change not just in emotional tone, but in factual content. Details shift. Sequences reorder. Things that were not present get added, not through lying, through the ordinary operation of a brain doing exactly what it was built to do. The villain in your head has been under renovation for months, possibly years. The person living there now may share a name with someone real, but the architecture is mostly yours. This is where it gets harder to sit with. The brain does not construct enemies randomly. It constructs them where it needs them. Psychologists studying attribution patterns, how people assign cause to events in their lives, consistently find that humans are strongly biased toward explaining negative outcomes through other people's character rather than circumstances. Your project failed because your manager undermined it, not because the market shifted. The relationship ended because of who they were, not because of a collision of two people both doing their best badly. A person as the cause is more useful than a system as the cause. A person can be identified, avoided, warned against, blamed. A system offers nowhere for the anger to go. The enemy is not just a cognitive error. It is a solution. It resolves uncertainty. It explains pain. It transforms something that happened to you into something done to you, which is neurologically far easier to carry. Victimhood and agency feel like opposites. The research suggests they operate as partners. The clearer the villain, the more intact the self. This is not a new observation. Ancient Roman philosophers wrote about it. Every major religious tradition has frameworks for it. What is newer is the granularity with which neuroscience can now trace the exact pathways through which the brain builds and maintains these constructions. The anterior cingulate cortex, the amygdala's role in emotional memory consolidation, the prefrontal cortex's limited ability to revise what emotion has already encoded. The architecture has a name now. The rooms have been mapped. What the maps cannot tell you is where the real person ends and the construction begins. That is the question the research leaves open. Because for most people, the person in their head is not entirely invented. Something happened. Something was said or done or repeatedly not done. The brain took real material and built something larger than the evidence supported, but the evidence existed. Separating the foundation from the structure, the event from the elaboration, requires a kind of cognitive archaeology that most people are never taught to do and rarely have reason to attempt. The researchers who study this most carefully are precise about what the data shows and what it doesn't. The data shows that human brains reliably construct worse versions of people who have caused them pain. It shows that these constructions are maintained and reinforced over time through selective memory retrieval and confirmatory processing. It shows that the enemy serves psychological functions that explain why the brain resists revising it. What the data cannot reach is whether any specific enemy in any specific person's life is more construction than reality. That is a question only one person can answer, and the brain that needs to answer it is the same brain that built the case. There is a person in your life your brain has decided is the problem. Maybe it's right. Maybe the pattern is real, the evidence is sound, and the version of them living in your head is accurate enough to trust. The brain that built that case is the same brain that kept your ancestors alive for 300,000 years. It is very good at what it does. It was just never designed to be fair.